Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, Security in the Cloud. Your presenter today is Taylor Mercedes. She is our Manager of Strategic IT Advisory Services here at Stanball-Ness. And just a few housekeeping items before I turn it over to Taylor this afternoon. You can customize what you're seeing today by going to the GoToWebinar screen viewer. So you can maximize the webcam that you see Taylor on, or just look at the presentation, whatever you prefer. Those options are out there for you. Your audio options today, you can either use the call-in option that was provided to you at the time of registration or your computer audio. If you experience any audio issues throughout the presentation, you can toggle back and forth between the two. We find that the dial-in option is a little more reliable as it's not streamed over internet. There is a questions panel in the GoToWebinar pane that you can insert your questions in for Taylor this afternoon, as we do not monitor the chat box during the presentation. There's no polls today as we are not offering CPE credit this afternoon, but there is a handout available for download in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel. And as always, there is that survey at the end of the presentation. Let us know how we did. If there's any questions that were not answered during the presentation, you can enter them in there, and we will respond to those individually. And without further ado, Taylor, you can take it away.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kaylee, as always. So yeah, guys, we're going to be talking about security in the cloud today. I thought it was great, obviously, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we've got Halloween around the corner here, so I thought I'd give you guys some nightmare fuel talking about some of the security threats and trends that we're dealing with in the current landscape. This webinar is really going to be good for not just our IT leaders, but also our business leaders. Cybersecurity, it comes down to not just the folks putting the stuff in place, but also our users and our leaders. It's important for all of us to be making good decisions around cybersecurity and to have awareness about what those threats are and what we can do to do our part. So we'll dig into this today. I'll be touching base on some of the trends we've seen here in 2021 around cybersecurity. We're going to be digging into some threats specifically in the cloud. And then I'm going to go through and give you guys a demo of some of the ways you can identify vulnerabilities within specifically the Microsoft 365 platform. And then also show you a demo of a report that we provide for our customers, provide even further context around security within that Microsoft 365 platform. We found that to be really helpful for folks in terms of getting a good idea of what their environment looks like and making good decisions around that. So we will dig right in. All right. Okay, so speaking about trends here, obviously we all know we've gone through tons of transformation in terms of how we use technology over the past couple of years. Digital transformation, it's been great. We can work more flexibly. There's lots of new opportunities that come out of that, but we've done it really quickly, and there's always some challenges that come from jumping into anything super quickly. Obviously, we met the needs that needed to happen so folks can work efficiently, and that's super great. But what we've noticed with a lot of organizations, that extra planning, it really didn't go into place around some of the solutions that were rolled out. So regardless of if you are moving to remote work, or maybe you started implementing Teams, that stuff happened really quick because it had to happen quickly. And what that resulted in is a lot of security gaps within those solutions, particularly in the cloud solutions. We're moving away from those on-prem solutions, putting things like your accounting software and your communication and all that stuff. We're taking it out of the office, putting it in the cloud, but we need to make sure those security gaps are filled. So that's definitely something we've been running into. I'm getting a note about my microphone. I'll see if I can come a little closer, and hopefully you guys can hear me a little bit better. I'll do my best here. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, transformation with anything, with any major changes that you make, you got to do that planning. You got to fill those gaps. Not always possible, but I think it's important right now to take a deep breath, circle back around, sit down, and really be intentional about how you set your security policies and really understand what goes into the security, especially in the cloud platforms that we're looking at. So that's definitely a major trend. Lots of conversations we're having around that. Another huge one, no one wants to hear this. The cost of security is rising. IT spending has gone up, I think, 5% since the previous year. We're expected to spend globally, I think, $4 trillion on IT, and a huge portion of that is going towards security. 66% of businesses plan to spend more on security going into 2022. So yeah, budgets are going up for this, and there's a lot of different factors that play into why these costs are going up. One of them is a major talent shortage within the cybersecurity realm. There just aren't enough people to fill those seats. There's a huge need right now. If anyone's considering a career change here, cybersecurity is a great one because there just are not enough people. And because of that, obviously commanding higher salaries, that's going to translate into the services that we purchase, the products that we purchase. Those costs get passed on. Those resources aren't cheap. They're super critical. And it's just something that we have to deal with in today's landscape. It doesn't seem to be changing. It's a valuable piece of each organization. So it's going to be expensive. The other part of this, a lot of folks are facing right now, cybersecurity policies. They're requiring a whole lot more proof that you have your ducks in a row in terms of security. I've had a ton of forms come through from different clients that are way more detailed than they used to be in terms of doing due diligence and proving to those insurance companies that you have everything in place that you need to have in place for them to insure you. And if you don't have that stuff in place, they're not going to do it for you. They're not going to provide you with that insurance. Another big thing with this is clients are also requesting more documentation around security and what you have in place there. And all of this is kind of feeding in. It's causing more cost to actually put that stuff in place. Just getting more stringent. Clients won't do business with you if you don't have your security in place and working. Cybersecurity isn't going to cover, insurance isn't going to cover you if you don't have stuff in place. We've even seen a single breach or a single claim against a cybersecurity policy resulting in a termination of that policy. And it gets really difficult to circle back around and find new coverage because they're just not really willing to accept that risk anymore. We've run into, obviously, in the past couple of years, some highly publicized threats that have happened in terms of ransomware, the SolarWinds stuff. We heard the president even talking about that last year, which is super surprising to hear some of this stuff in the limelight here and so top of mind for the public. But if you don't have that stuff in place and you're not making those investments to be able to prove that you've got your cybersecurity under control, you're just going to miss out in this area. And then the other area is obviously regulation. We're seeing some things coming down from the government, particularly for our engineers, the CMMC regulations. They're requiring you to have a lot of things in place to even be able to do business and to be able to have those government contracts. So we're engaging a lot of folks right now in that space to help them wrap their heads around it, getting the stuff in place to be able to continue to do business. So at this point, those rising costs of security, there's a lot more stuff you guys got to put in place. It's really just the cost of doing business. So as you're considering your IT budget for the year, just keep these items in mind in terms of strategy and knowing what direction you want to go in, because those costs are definitely going to go up. None of us like it, but that's where we are right now when it comes to that. And then obviously threats in the cloud. That's a major trend that we're seeing. We're moving more into the cloud, so the hackers are following suit and attacking it more. And we're making it really easy for them in a lot of situations. I come across regularly, folks move their solutions into the cloud, whether it's their email, whether it's their accounting software or anything else. And they just assume that those providers have it taken care of, that you're just going to be secure because Microsoft is handling your stuff or Amazon is handling your stuff. And that's not always the case. It's usually not the case. Providers will put baseline security in place, but it's usually a minimum, really because security settings, it's going to differ from company to company. Each organization is unique and you're going to have different needs. So they give you the mechanisms to be able to put that security in place, but it doesn't come out of the box. And to make that assumption is really dangerous. So it's important that you circle back around and make sure that that stuff is taken care of. We're also dealing with some fragmentation when it comes to cloud management. I hear this a lot. You've got a million different cloud solutions. Maybe accounting picked one. Maybe your sales is using something else. You've got users who are downloading software and uploading files into the cloud, and things are really just all over the place. And when that happens, you have issues with data being leaked out. You've got bad passwords being used. You've got settings that aren't in place. So that fragmentation is something that organizations need to wrap their head around right now, just getting that under control, taking command of those cloud solutions and having a unified approach to the cloud management. This is just, it's super huge right now because particularly when it comes to the digital transformation we just went through, A lot of you are using way more cloud solutions. Users are taking it upon themselves. And BYOD situations, bring your own device. They're using their own stuff. So there's lots of risk when it comes to that, and that's just creating more threats there as well. Obviously, in the clouds, we're moving our servers up there. That holds our critical information. We need that stuff to be able to work. Hackers are targeting that as well. A lot of organizations have a skill gap when it comes to cloud infrastructure. Everyone's excited about using it, but not everyone has a great grasp of what it takes to secure infrastructure in the cloud, because it's different. There's different things that go into it versus the on-prem solutions. And what you don't know can really get you into trouble at times. So just making sure you're working with the right partners when you're moving your infrastructure into the cloud to make sure you've got everything locked down and secure, and you're not going to be the next ransomware attack that happens because there was a door left open that no one was aware of. Just making sure when you're picking that up, there's a strategy behind it. Lack of data governance, another really big issue that we're running into. Not only do we have lots of different cloud solutions, but there's data everywhere. Maybe you've got some of it in SharePoint, maybe you've got some of it on your server, maybe it's in personal OneDrives. Regardless, you need a unified approach to manage who has access to that data, where it's stored, to make sure stuff isn't leaking out. For instance, if someone leaves your organization, do you know that that data is going to be removed from their computer if they were using their personal computer and syncing things up? You need to have control over that and to be able to understand where your data sits, how to protect it. Because at the end of the day, you're liable for that information. If someone who's not supposed to have access to it gets access to it, you're going to be in trouble there. So that's a trend, people sitting down and saying, okay, where is our data? Who has access to it? How do we protect it? And really building a strategy around that as well. Data loss goes into that as well, a little bit different here. In terms of data loss, we're seeing more ransomware attacks within cloud solutions, particularly email. A hacker will get access to an account, they'll lock it down. You won't be able to access your email unless you pay them a ransom. And you've assumed that you can get this data back if you go to Microsoft and say, hey, I need this stuff, and you're not going to get it back. It doesn't work that way. So if Microsoft servers go down, they've got themselves covered. They can put it back in place. But if an individual reaches out to them and says, hey, I need this, you're not going to get very far. I've been in that situation before, and it's pretty frustrating. If you look at your terms of agreement, your terms of service with these different providers, you're going to see that a lot of times making sure your data is backed up is going to fall on you. You need to protect your data. You need to make sure that's in place. So this is something we're hearing also of wanting to put more backup solutions in place, understanding what's being backed up and what needs to be backed up and what your responsibilities are versus what your cloud providers' responsibilities are there. So that's a huge one. If it's not on your radar, it's a really easy one to put in place, particularly in that Microsoft 365 platform. That's something we help with all the time. It's just a really good thing to do. And then abusive access. This is something that comes up periodically. If you aren't aware of what users have access to what, you can have situations where people are doing things they're not supposed to. Say, for instance, a help desk person getting access to a CEO's email address or email mailbox. Or say someone goes out of town and we forward email and it never gets turned off. And then that person is promoted and that other person is getting things that they're not supposed to. So making sure access control is put in place, making sure no one's getting access to the things they're not supposed to. And that if they are, you've got controls in place to be able to know that this is happening and to be able to protect against it. Okay, so I'll stop right here for a minute. I don't see any questions in the box. I'll jump back. Any questions from anybody so far before we jump into our poll and then our demo? Not seeing any so far.
I don't see any questions, Taylor. But your sound does keep on going out, in and out. It was good there for a little bit. So when we do get to the poll, if you wanted to try to call in with the dial-in number, that might help our crowd hear you a little bit better.
Let me give that a shot here, guys. Bear with me. If you want to go ahead and pop that poll up, I will work on this.
Perfect. All right, everybody. So here's the poll for this afternoon, and Taylor just has a quick question for you. So the question is, how often do you review the security status of your cloud platforms? So she put a couple answers up here for you, at least monthly, at least quarterly, at least annually. The next one is, I don't think my IT provider department handles it. And then the last response is never. So I'm going to assume that Taylor's wanted response for this question is at least monthly. And probably her least favorite answer to this question will probably be never, or I don't think my IT provider department handles this. So we'll give you all a few moments to answer the poll, and then we'll go ahead and move on as soon as Taylor's back with us.
Kaylee, can you throw me that phone number here real quick? I was trying to pull it up.
You can.
And actually, I'll speak to this while she's sending that over. If folks are choosing D, that one is the one that actually concerns me a little bit the most. Because what's happening in that situation, hopefully you guys can hear part of what I'm saying here. What concerns me about that is if you haven't had a formal conversation about it, it likely has not happened. So there definitely needs to be visibility. You got to have accountability there in terms of what's being reviewed, what's not being reviewed. Let's see here. So that's huge for sure. Sorry about this, guys. I'm going to try to dial in here.
All right, we have about 60% of the crowd that has voted here. So I'm going to go ahead and close and share the results and talk through those just so everybody can kind of see what their peers are up to.
I apologize for the technical difficulties.
All right, so the responses here are 5% say their IT department reviews the security status at least monthly. 53%, which is the most popular here, says at least quarterly. And 21% say at least annually. 5% say they don't think that their IT provider does this. And 16% said never.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, I need to turn my volume down to take care of that echo. All right, I think we're good.
You're good.
All right, awesome. Sorry about that disturbance, guys. We'll go ahead and keep moving here. Thanks for taking that poll. All right. So what I want to dig into now is identifying vulnerabilities in that Microsoft 365 platform that many of us are using. I know this is something we look at on a regular basis. We have customers come to us who maybe thought their IT provider was handling this or just need to get a better grasp of it for insurance reasons. There's lots of reasons you want to dig into this. It's important in terms of visibility to be aware of what the options are, where you could be vulnerable, and all of those things. So let me go ahead and pull over an example of the Microsoft Secure Score. That's the first thing I'm going to go over. So what that is, it's a service through Microsoft. It requires a little bit of specialty licensing. It's not terribly expensive, but it gives you insight into what features and settings are enabled in your environment and which ones are not, and how that contributes to your security. And just for some context here, I created a demo environment from Microsoft. So it was just like spinning up a brand new Microsoft 365 environment with the default settings. So the security score you're going to see here is for a baseline setup Microsoft 365 environment. So you should be able to see, try and share my screen here. There we go. So if you can see my screen right here, the secure score for a baseline default settings Microsoft environment, 17.24. I don't know about you, but that's totally unacceptable for me. If I saw that score for my environment, I'd be very, very nervous for my business. But this is what you get out of the box. There's tons of stuff you can do to lock it down. But if you don't have eyes on this environment and you're not taking an active role and making sure your security is configured in the proper way, this is where you sit. This is what hackers have to work with. So definitely something you want to be aware of. I'll walk you through this portal a little bit. So obviously you see your score here, and there's a point system. So they give you different points for the different areas that you can address. I'll walk through a couple of the different areas. So the biggest one here is requiring multi-factor authentication for administrative roles. You'd be surprised how many times we'll go into an organization and the owner of the company or the CEO has full admin rights to the 365 environment, and they don't have multi-factor enabled. So what can happen in that scenario is, say they get an email that looks like it's from Microsoft that says, hey, we need you to log in again, and they type in their email address and password. Not only do they have access to the CEO's email, but they also have access to the entire company's platform. So what we want to do is take not only lock it down with MFA and make sure all of our admins have that to prevent that sort of issue, but take a approach of least privilege. So any users that you have, you want to give them the minimal amount of privilege possible for them to do their jobs. That means the CEO not having full access to a 365 environment. Yes, they're the boss, but no, they don't need that. So things like that. Obviously, locking down with MFA, that mitigates a lot of that risk. But that's one of the top things, making sure your admins have this in place. Super important, just to review on a regular basis, just in case something new is added in, making sure that's cleaned up. Second one here, also related to multi-factor authentication. I'll click into this one. Pop it up here. So this one is specifically relating to making sure all of your users are able to put MFA in place. And just to give you a little bit of an overview here, what comes up when you click on one of these items in SecureScore. It gives you prerequisites. So if you need any additional licensing, it's going to tell you. It's going to give you process on how to enable things. It's going to tell you what you're protecting against when you enable it. And then for documentation purposes, you can kind of map this out, which can be really helpful for insurance if you're doing a DIY approach, to kind of map this out from here. You can share it with different folks in your organization, say, hey, we need this taken care of. And you can also go in and manage it. So there's a lot you can do from here. I'll just add a quick disclaimer, though. I am showing it to you. It's kind of, the bells and whistles are neat, but it's sort of in the weeds. And if you don't know what you're doing in this portal, I don't recommend going in and clicking and turning anything on. You may have the idea that, yeah, we want to be as secure as possible. Let's go ahead and enable every single policy in here. And what you're going to end up with is a lot of angry users who weren't prepared for the changes that were going to happen. So for instance, this enable policy to block legacy authentication. Sure, we want to block old authentication. It's not secure. We want to do that. Most likely what's going to happen if you go in and enable a policy like this is if you have scanned email set up on your copiers, it's going to break. So you need to understand the implications of each security measure that you put in place, and really have a plan to roll that out without just going in and saying we're going to do it all, or just clicking things and hoping that it turns out for the best. So Microsoft makes all these recommendations, all these improvement actions that you can go through, and you can sort of map that out and have a good visual of what's happening there. Outside of the SecureScore, there's also additional security things you can put in place. One thing I want to point out is policies and rules. Like I said, a little in the weeds here, but I think from a high level, if you're a business leader, it's important to be aware of this stuff, so you can follow up and make sure it's actually happening. So out of the box, Microsoft does have some policies, some anti-spam policies, anti-malware stuff that you can take advantage of. But things like safe attachments, so Microsoft scanning your attachments for you, safe links, scanning your links, making sure you're safe, anti-phishing, making sure no one's impersonating anybody. These things you need additional licensing for. And you got to go ahead and get that from Microsoft to make sure you're taking advantage of those features. So, okay, you go ahead and buy the licensing, you put it in place, everyone's got one. Great. You're still not done. You need to go into each of these policies and have them configured. And then on top of that, you want to be monitoring on a regular basis to make sure nothing crazy is coming through. You haven't been attacked. You're going to have visibility. So this is where I say, look at it monthly. I know for our customers, we get daily alerts on what's happening in the 365 environment. We're looking at the SecureScore on a monthly basis. We're configuring all these policies. And then as Microsoft releases new features and settings and things like that, as the threat landscape changes, we go in and make these adjustments. So it's not set it and forget it. I think that's a misconception when it comes to the cloud, that you just go ahead, spin it up, and it's going to work, and it's going to be secure, and it's going to be safe. Not the case. You manage your on-prem environment. You also need to manage your cloud environment to an extent. It's a little bit less. Obviously, you have less responsibility. It's a shared responsibility model. But there are things that you are responsible for as an organization. So it's just important to be aware of these things to make sure you're on the right page. I'm going to go ahead and show you a report, so a user account security report that we offer for our customers. It's something we're going to give you some information on today. If it's something you're interested in, if you need some help around this, we can certainly help you with it. But this is a great way as business leaders to take a look at the state of your Microsoft 365 cloud environment and get a good grasp of where you stand. So obviously you have the secure score, but you're going to get more granular detail here. So you can actually make those decisions that are going to make most sense for your business versus a generic approach. So we build out these reports. All of this information you can find within 365. It's going to take you hours and hours of digging to pull it out and to put it together in a way that's going to be meaningful for you to be able to make informed decisions with. I've done that process. It's no fun. I don't recommend it. So we've built out this process, this tool, to provide you with that information, to give you an executive level view of where you stand as an organization when it comes to your security. So I'll just run through this a little bit here just to give you an overview of what's involved here and what's included. You'll get a summary of how many accounts you have. You'll get a number of compromised accounts. So this is run on a demo account that we have. So compromised accounts, what that means is your password, your email address, and the password have been leaked somewhere in the dark web, and we'll dig into that a little bit further later. You get blocked accounts. So maybe one of your users was sending out a ton of spam and their account got blocked. Maybe you weren't aware of it. That gets put in there as well. Password changes, how often are passwords getting changed or passwords set to expire. Microsoft has a school of thought when it comes to this. They've kind of revised their stance on it. They recommend that you set up multi-factor authentication and you don't set passwords to expire all the time. They believe that when you're changing your passwords all the time, you're going to have weaker passwords and they're actually going to end up less secure than if you put multi-factor in place and just keep with a nice strong password. If you have compliance needs, if you're in an industry that's regulated, you may have different requirements. So once again, it just comes down to what your organization is going to need, making sure you're analyzing all that data as you're making decisions based on whether you should make these changes or not. Multi-factor, this is a big one. A lot of folks say, oh, I've got multi-factor, so that means everybody else has it, right? Not always the case. So you want to get a good view of that, who has it, who doesn't. You're going to get a further breakdown in a separate part of the account, but this gives you a good overview. Who has administrative access? So this is going to break down who has access to what. So you may find that maybe someone needed access at one point and they no longer do. Maybe they have more access than they need. Like I mentioned before, that the concept of least privilege, making sure they only have access to the things they need to do their job and nothing more. You can kind of go through here, drill into it, see who has access to what, and make a strategy to kind of limit that down if necessary. You get login attempts. So if someone's failed to log in, if we're seeing people attacking your environment, we're going to see that sort of thing. This part of the report is what always makes people super nervous. And it certainly should. It's going to show you in the past 30 days what countries have tried to log into your accounts, how many times it's happened, and how many times they were successful. So say this company is based in Brazil, and okay, those are legitimate, but no one else should be logging in from other countries. What's going on here? Maybe a password was leaked, multiple passwords were leaked, and folks are getting in and you don't even know it, which certainly can happen. So, but this gives good insight into who's knocking at your door, what the volume is, and you'd be really surprised. It's always pretty staggering to see the numbers associated with this. It's important to think about. It's not just kids in their basement trying to hack into you anymore. These are full-blown organizations that are trying to make money here. So people are trying to get in. You may not be aware of it all the time, but it is happening. And what happens when they get in? A lot of times what happens is they might set up email forwarding. So they get into your account, you're unaware of it. They set up email to forward over to them so they can monitor what's happening in your environment, and you don't even know it. And say we go through and we clean everything up, we set you up with multi-factor authentication, we change your password, that email is still forwarding out and they're monitoring your data flow. And maybe they don't end up attacking you, maybe they're monitoring your correspondence with your clients and they're using that information and leveraging it to get into there. So there's a lot of different scenarios that can happen when hackers get access to your stuff, but a report like this shows you exactly who has that forwarding on. We can keep track of that, we can monitor it, we can lock you down and make sure you're safe in that place. You can also have situations where maybe you've got an employee who's about to quit and they've just started copying everything to their personal email to go ahead and start their own firm. Obviously, you don't want to do that. Confidentiality, all that fun stuff. This gives you visibility into where it's going. If you don't want stuff going to personal email accounts, you can lock that down. And you can set settings to prevent it from happening going forward. But without that visibility, you won't be able to make those decisions. You also get information about access. So if you've shared access to a mailbox in the past, should someone still have access to that? Because you can provide access to a calendar, email, SharePoint data. You can essentially give anyone access to those items. And if you've done it before, you're going to want to be able to keep track of that, obviously. So this will break down who has access to what and give you that information as well. So lots of good info there. It drills in even further. So for us IT folks, let me scroll over. This is demo data, so there are some errors in it. But it's going to give you a breakdown of all your users and all this different information on an individual basis. So say I want to tackle getting my admin roles taken care of and making sure everyone's matched up. I can go in and I can sort by admin role. And maybe I just want to see our company administrators. I can break it down and just see who those folks are and make sure we limit their stuff. So it gives you lots of control here to kind of prioritize what items you want to deal with. Like I said, you've got blocked accounts, password expiring, MFA. If they haven't logged in for a long time, outside of security, there's also opportunities for cost savings when you're taking a look at this and having this data right in front of you. Maybe you've got users who are licensed, who shouldn't be licensed. Maybe you're lacking security software on some users. Some folks have Defender, other ones don't. Maybe you need that to be for everybody. You can get better visibility into who has what without having to go into the Microsoft 365 platform, dig through settings, have access that maybe you shouldn't have. And even to run this report, we don't need direct access. We use some backend software that just gives us one-time access to pull this access. So this is our data out. So if you like us to help with this, but you're weary about giving access to keys to the castle, then we have options for that as well to kind of pull this out and not touch as much as what would normally need to happen if you did it manually. So login details, what IP address folks try to get in, who they were trying to access, if it failed or not. So lots and lots of nice granular detail. And then this last tab over here, breaches. So what this has to do with is if you had an email address associated with your business that was included in a breach, essentially. So if that email address was dumped into a report saying, okay, this email address and password were leaked out, it's going to show here, and it's going to show you when that breach was. If this was live data, if these were real people, you would see their email address here, and it's going to tell you when it happened. And I have an example of this, something that I ran into. There was a CEO of an organization who had a LinkedIn password, and LinkedIn was hacked, I think back in 2012 or 2016, a while back. That password was leaked, and he still had the same password set for his business email. And eventually someone made their way over to that data, logged into their business email, and sent out a whole bunch of junk to try to hack your customers, essentially. And having this information, having this visibility, and knowing that, oh, hey, this account was hacked, maybe you would have remembered to change that password and set up additional security. So if you've got someone who hasn't changed their password in however many days and it overlaps with a breach, we might want to circle back to that person and say, hey, have you changed this? How are we securing your information? Because this stuff does happen. And then we have some tools on the back end that will alert us of this sort of thing as it happens going forward as well. But this will give you a one-time snapshot up to the date of the report. So lots of good information there. Any questions on that report? I don't see any right now, but I open up the floor here. Not so far. Okay. We'll jump back over. So we've went through all this information. It can be a lot. It can be a little overwhelming. You're probably wondering, okay, where do we get started? How do we get started with this? First thing, obviously, you want to do is assess your cloud environment. Like I said, if you want to go in and do it manually, you certainly can. We make it a whole lot easier with our Microsoft security assessment that I just showed you. So we can do that for you if you want. It doesn't take terribly long, within a couple weeks. We've got good data to be able to provide you some feedback on what needs to happen in your environment. We will build that action plan for you. We'll prioritize the items. We'll have conversations with you about what your business needs, what you use, and kind of tailor that plan to meet your needs. And then obviously, anytime you put a plan in place, you can't just set it and forget it. It's kind of the trend here. You want to implement it. You want to monitor it. You want to make sure on an ongoing basis that your stuff is secure, your cloud is secure, and not just say, we did this once, yay, we're great. Not how it works. You've got to keep track of that. So that's something we can help with as well. And I do want to mention that if you reach out and that you mention this webinar, we're going to do the security assessment for you at a 50% off rate. So definitely reach out. I'm going to throw up my contact information if anyone's interested in getting started with that. I'd be happy to help. I'd love to have a conversation. We can chat about that, see what your needs are, and see if that's going to be a good fit. But I think, wow, okay, so we got through that pretty quickly unless we have any additional questions. I don't think we do. Well, all right, well, I'm going to throw up my contact information. If anyone comes up with any questions after the fact, feel free to email me. Feel free to fill it out in the survey that we completed. Oh, let me pop it back up for you. And yeah, let us know what you think. We'll be happy to help you out, have that conversation, get you started with whatever you need in terms of getting your cloud environment secure. So thank you so much for joining me, and have a great day, everyone.